my betters.
He nods and
I'm sorry, this is a um, interesting phrase of words. Which betters are you referring to? Perhaps Sir Rolf in the camp, or Lord Silverhand?
uh, he seems he seems rather dejected at this point, and he just sort of lets his hand fall to his side, and he says, "Are your people so uncivilized?"
She's an Elgi. That's a given.
He raises an eyebrow and says, "I don't recall asking the mud to speak back to me."
Civilization or civilized is in the eye of the beholder. We are quite civilized in Widrioth.
He says, "I know not of this Widrioth you speak, but I know your people wear leaves and twigs and act as if it is clothing."
Do I, sir?
Uh, uh, hold on a second. I have to roll for something for him. At this point, he looks at you, and his expression gets a lot more stern, and his face turns a little red. And he says, if you're going to serve in my retinue, you're going to need to learn not to talk back so constantly."
I apologize. It must be my wildish ways.
He shakes his head and says, "Lady knows why. Lady knows why she permitted beasts to speak and call them elves."
I will look at Drac.
Drac has a very, very amused expression on his face, just from all of this.
You
He has
notice
many opinions on the both of you.
you do notice the two men behind him appear incredibly nervous. Like they are in so many ways not okay with this exchange.
I will look at Sir Raymond and kind of look at him directly in the eyes, and I will also say, if we are to partner, you should also know that I can wield magic.
He winces notably at this, and
I don't want to unleash a spell and have it startle your precious horse.
the two men behind him, if you feel very confident that if you were to take a step towards them and shout boo, they would probably die. More than likely. At the very least pass out. But you do hear some muttering from the two men behind you as well. And Riemann holds his ground before turning to the two men behind him and says, "Volo, guy, deal with this thing. If she's going to serve me faithfully, she's going to need to learn her manners, lest we have issues." And at that point, he just sort of, I guess, dismisses you. He sort of just kind of turns around without much in the way of saying anything, and marches off back to Tim with his horses. And he seems to be muttering to himself about something, but it's in a language you don't understand. And the two other men very carefully, like in wrangling their hands and hunched over to make themselves as small and as far away from you as possible while simultaneously walking closer, one of them says, yes, sir, we will try."
I will look at both of them and wait, almost kind of bemused.
They seem very hesitant for a good bit, and they start whispering to themselves in a language you don't understand before one of them finally...
Should I perhaps leave your lord's present? Is that what he requires? It's very difficult to understand your Bretonian ways.
One of them finally gives... the one that's been identified as Volo finally gives an elbow to the one who's been identified as Guy, who stumbles forward a little bit, and he says, I understand you're not used to our ways, but please, you must try harder not to upset his lordship. It can go terribly wrong for all of us. Please.
Perhaps you would deign to tell me what I did wrong, and let us start from there.
He kind of makes and he looks at the other one, and the other one just sort of shrugs. And Guy turns back to you and he says, "We discuss over food, maybe."
I will nod.
The other one, you notice the other one hiss something to him in Bretonnian, and he does turn slightly pale, and he turns to you and he says, "You do eat food, yes?"
It depends on the food.
They seem paler at this announcement, but nonetheless, a number of bells begin ringing from the kitchen, and slowly but surely a herd of individuals make their way to get food. The two peasants, the first thing they do is they make sure to get a heaping helping for Lord Riemann before then taking care of themselves and you. And they do offer to spend some hours before you go to bed to help you navigate the dignified etiquette of dealing with a noble knight.
I will actually listen to them for these 3 hours. Few hours.
Okay, and by this point, everyone, you basically get your sleeping arrangements. If you are silver tier or above, you get to sleep, basically, you get like a guaranteed tent because they appreciate what you do. If you are less than silver, so if you're brass 5 or below, you do not get a tent. You can find a place to sleep inside or outside the camp. You're on your own. Nobody cares about you.
Nice. Drac has a tent.
So I'm pretty sure Drek is the only person that has a tent.
Yep.
Dwarf privileges, ho!
I will again try to find a tree.
The Bretonnians do spend a few hours with you, and basically most of their message tries to boil down to, as gently as they can, to a creature that they think is more than capable of exploding their heads at any given moment, or stealing their souls while they sleep, is that Riemann is a noble and good-hearted soul, but unfortunately, he is noble-born. Unfortunately, in many ways. And because of that, the ABCs that you basically hear are that he doesn't like to be talked back to. He always likes to be referred to as Sir Riemann. And but that they do very heavily emphasize that he is a brave soldier and a warrior and beloved here in Hagerdorf for good reason, even by the local peasants.
And that reason is?
According to them, Riemann is one of the few who cares enough to actually defend the village from creatures that are being disturbed by the activities of the Silverwood Lumber Company, whereas the Bloody Hounds most certainly do not. As far as the Bloody Hounds are concerned, Hagerdorf is on its own.
And I will also ask these two how he treats them personally.
Both of them are head over heels to say that he treats them perfectly flawlessly, as is deserved their station.
Can I tell if they're lying?
Roll an intuition check. Guy seems 100% sincere, but Guy also seems much older and seems to have been serving someone else before Riemann. Volo definitely seems like younger than Riemann. Like he's a boy, basically. He seems to really respect Riemann, but when you kind of throw the question of, do you think you get treated the way in a way that you're happy with, he agrees with everything Guy says, but you notice he's not super enthusiastic about it.
I will nod.
That being
and
said,
say,
he doesn't seem to hate Riemann, and he doesn't seem afraid of Riemann.
I will say, well, I will ask, what is it that their lord actually needs me for? Do they think?
At this, Volo pops up and says, "Oh, well, you're one of the Fey folk, so you can track the beasts that and monsters that he seeks to hunt to prove himself in the Lady's grace. We are not well suited to that task, and there are no hunting hounds here in this camp. The bloody hounds tend not to take well to those who actually use hounds due to some comparison concern, some petty imperial issue. But nonetheless, we cannot keep up with our master, especially when he rides by horseback, which he nearly always does. So hopefully you will be more suited to the task."
I will nod.
Guy does say that. Guy does nod a bit and says, "And if I may, one last note. It's not my place to say, but do be patient with my lord. I know I was there when the boy's father dealt with the forest folk, and their family has an understandable quarrel with your folk."
As do many Bretonian noble families.
He nods and kind of wrings his hands, but doesn't comment any further.
But I will thank both of them for their time in teaching me, and I will say, I will ask them how long they have been here at camp.
Guy estimates that Guy mentions that they've been with Silverwood since Bretonia, that they joined Silverwood in Bretonia, but he estimates roughly that they've been together for a few years at least. But as far as this area, they've only been here for maybe a moon cycle.
I will say one last thing, and I will say I apologize if this question comes across as weird or perhaps not phrased properly. But I am looking for a tree with a set of parameters, and I will kind of lay out the parameters of a sleeping tree for me.
They will both give you very bizarre looks, and Guy seems very frightened at the aspect of you desiring a particular tree. Are you going to tell them why, or are you just laying it out?
Just laying it out.
Guy seems pretty unwilling to commit to an answer, and when Volo tries to, Guy shuts him up pretty handedly. He definitely asserts his authority.
So that's a no. Okay. I will stand up and thank them again, and I will leave.
Great. All right, dinner goes off spectacularly, by the way, so Wrist, if you would like, they do offer you a position as an assistant cook in the kitchen.
Have I discovered I don't have a tent by now?
Yes.
Does that come with its own tent? Or a tent? Any kind of roof?
Mabel says, "Oh, of course, laddie, you can sleep in here."
No, what is here?
The kitchen does technically have a roof.
Okay. That sounds great.
It is better than no roof. And you notice it's where the more standoffish halfling sleeps. It's
the one whose name I don't know.
Correct. The one who has not offered his name. It is pretty spacious, though. Like, there's plenty of space for both of you.
That sounds grand. I accept the position of assistant cook. Maybe I'll pick up a skill or two from you.
He laughs and says, "Oh, with the work you did tonight, lad, I feel the same way."
By the way, have you been to that weird little village off away from here?
He pauses and thinks for a moment and says, I didn't know there was a village not far from here.
Yes, here must be really far away. Guide who led us back said he'd never heard of a pie. Truly criminal it is.
He looks he looks extremely disgusted and says, well, no wonder I've never heard of the village then. Okay,
But yeah, I will basically talk shop with the halfling who will talk to me.
This will go off. I will attempt again in a bit.
Okay, if you say so. Alright, so dinner goes well. It is now nighttime. If you do not want your characters to be exhausted, they do need to go to bed.
Drac is going to bed.
Verstadt will find a place in between two tents and just sort of nestle in for the night.
All right.
Maybe not tonight. I'll find a tree and I will sleep in a tree.
The peasants do notice you wandering off before you start shouting in a language they don't understand for some reason. But when nothing happens, they don't call the guard to go kill the witch. Anyway, so the night passes, and I need to check one thing real quick.
Just tell them you're yelling at an evil tree.
There is a 20% chance that something happens.
Thank you, Val.
Excuse
that
me.
actually gives me an idea.
Something happens to Aztec. I rolled a 40, so nothing happens. All right.
Some fun stuff I can play with.
The night passes without incident, but early in the morning, just before all of you would have awoken naturally, you are woken up by members of the camp, various people who are basically just passing along a message that Lord Anders wants to see you. And they find all four of you and deliver that message.
Drac rolls up and starts looking for Lord Anders.
And they tell you can find him outside the camp in his own tent.
Verstadt will get up, make his way towards the entrance to the camp, and start looking for him.
Well, obviously, because of my amazing meal last night, I have been called in as a personal chef, so I will quickly go to meet my new patron.
All right. Calder, are you going as well?
They found me, yes.
They did. Somehow.
Okay.
You're not actually entirely sure how, but someone did manage to find you.
I will sigh and say I have to find a new tree now.
He looks insulted. All right. And for some reason, I thought I had the image of this place, but I don't. So you'll just have to use your imaginations. So
What? Imagination and a role play? Never.
Yeah. The four of you walk a little ways out of camp, and you get instructions where you basically follow the road. You follow a small path north a little bit. And it does not take long at all before you come across a very, very nice looking tent. It is gorgeous looking, and it looks like it is made out of some really nice material, and it's huge. Like it almost takes up a quarter of the war camp in its space, but it's kind of just out on its own for some reason.
Okay.
And
That is fancy.
that appears to be where you're expected.
I will nod to the others and ask if they had a good night or a good evening before I go, I guess, up to the tent door. Is there a guard?
No, there is no guard.
Okay, then I will just walk in, I guess.
I will follow behind.
All right, the four of you walk into this tent, and inside it's pretty dark at first. But almost immediately after you walk in, you hear someone say something, and a light gets. Someone lights a match and puts it into a lantern and turns it up. And suddenly, illuminated in front of you, you can see a fairly elderly man in some very, very high-class robes sitting at a large table in what looks probably to be a very ornate and comfy chair. And there is a woman standing behind him. And the woman, in contrast, she's very beautiful and pale with very long, kind of snowy white hair. But there's almost something like she looks very dangerous in that she's wearing a full set of mail armor on top of leathers, excluding, she doesn't have any kind of helmet, just sort of lets her hair hang loose. But the blades at her side look incredibly wicked and well used. And she just kind of radiates an aura of, like, very intense. But the man sitting next to her, who is, like I said, very elderly, and is just sort of relaxing in his chair, and he has very short, cropped black hair, and very kindly eyes that are sort of a pale gray, and he is almost the exact opposite. He has a wonderful, very positive, almost jovial air, and he sort of sits up and says, finally, our guests have arrived. And he gestures and says, Sasha, please, get them seats, please. And the woman very fluidly moves forward and acquires and very deftly moves out 4 incredibly comfortable looking seats for you. Except for you, Halfling, yours is more of a glorified footstool, but, you're a Halfling, so it works.
Oh, thank you, Sasha. I'm Wrist, by the way. Nice to meet ya. And I will settle on my ottoman.
The man nods and sort of keeps gesturing overly much for the rest of you to sit.
I will sit down.
Verstappen will sit down as well.
As you all sit, he claps his hands and says, Wonderful, wonderful. I, as you may have guessed, am Lord Anders von Bruner, and it is my absolute pleasure to meet the 4 of you.
The pleasure is ours, Lord?
He raises his hand and he says, there's no need for that. You could just call me Anders. I understand that the 4 of you are the ones that came in together yesterday.
We did indeed.
He nods and said, Good. Lord Otto sent me a missive about your arrival. I heard that you're sort of looking for work.
That'd be correct.
He claps his hand and says, of course, where are my manners? This is Sasha Kaminsky. She's my bodyguard. You see, I travel quite frequently into some rather dangerous places, so I employ her services to keep me safe. You need not worry, though. She's quite harmless in friendly environs.
Of course.
If you
Is
look,
her name Kislavite?
See, you're a Norskin dwarf. Yes.
Okay. Just checking, because it sounded like something that, like a name, like a style of name Drac would actually recognize.
Yes, you have met Kislavites before. She is the spitting image of a Kislavite, and she has the same icy air that they do. You imagine that if she's fun to talk to, it's probably only when there's drinking involved, and other than that, she's probably very dour.
Drac makes note of this.
But she doesn't say anything. She just sort of stares at the 4 of you, and anytime you look at her, you feel the temperature of the room drop a little bit. But Anders nods and says, well, you see, I recently moved out here, have been following around Lord Otto for the last 2 or 3 months. You see, me and him are old friends from our times in Altdorf. We bumped into each other during his studies. And he continues to nod and just sort of talk, ramble more than anything. And he says, you see, I have a very particular hobby. And when I found out that dear Otto was coming out to the Hager Cribs, I couldn't afford nor desire to pass up this opportunity. So I came here, but I need help of independently contracted individuals like yourselves.
I will look to the others before I say anything.
What's the job?
What's in the Hager Crypts that could bring you all the way out here?
He nods and
That
says,
couldn't be missed.
he claps his hand and says, "Oh, my dear halfling, there are such wonders hidden in these mountains. Did you know that one of the ancestral tribes of the Empire itself buried much of their dead here in these mountains? There are countless priceless artifacts to be found for those willing to look."
No, I hadn't. It's a shame no one bothered to mention this to me
still know
before.
the story of Kurgan and Sigmar, right?
Say what?
Norscan dwarves still know the story of Kurgan and Sigmar and the Oath and shit, right?
Yeah. You know about Sigmar and all that jazz.
I'm just like,
You're not.
because-
You do not have nearly the attachment to it that other dwarves do, but you are familiar with all of the broad details.
Because I was just wondering, because, you know, with Dwarven, like, respect for the past and stuff, like, stuff from the era of that Great Alliance would actually maybe interest Drac.
Yeah, it
human shit.
yeah, it might well be. It is definitely a big gap in the Norscan dwarves' knowledge of the South because y'all weren't in contact with them during that time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of mysteries there for your people. But he nods and he says, yes, and of course, beyond that, the Hager Crypts is rumored, of course, to have many strange and exotic creatures. And you see, I am a collector of anything unusual, artifacts, relics from long gone eras, and of course, I must admit, I have a bit of a taxidermy practice with rare creatures. I hope I have a personal museum at home, and I'm always looking to expand it. And there are so many legends of what may live up here that I just couldn't resist. Now,
Well, how do wood elves view taxidermy?
it's a little weird, but it's not that. To you, it's kind of wasteful, but it's not as bad as a lot of other things humans do, because at least they're not just like throwing it. The
At least
fact
they're not like leaving it on the side to be carrying.
more like at least they're not using it for more perverse things. It is kind of weird that they use it and don't like recycle any of it, so they kind of take it out of the cycle. And they're also not destroying nature, especially if he's hunting monstrous creatures. That is pretty okay by your standards, because there are beasts that you do not consider noble that are not good for this world or the weave.
Okay.
That being said, it is still kind of weird as far as like preserving creatures, but if you really were to think about it, it's probably no different than what some of your people do, but you would have to do a bit of mental gymnastics. But he sort of waves his hands and says, that being said, of course, I'm more than happy just to have their bones or, what can be salvaged. I don't expect clean kills on, say, a basilisk, because I'm not ridiculous. I don't want you to put yourselves too much in harm's way. And so I want to say, before you respond, that I compensate very, very fairly for any information that you can find. I am looking for burial mounds. I'm looking for lost secret caverns to past religions, or forgotten shrines. Of course, any exotic creatures you can find, I will pay heftily for them, dead or alive.
I will speak up and say, what, have you found anything up here thus far?
He kind of weaves his fingers together and says, well, I try not to kiss and tell, let's say. But I do know that there are some interesting things to be found up here.
I hope you're not kissing a basilisk.
He waves his hand and says, oh, only a joke, my dear dwarfen friend. And he sort of looks at you for a moment and he says, then again, something's different about you.
I come from even more north than her. And he points at Sasha.
She almost looks like challenged by your point, to the extent that you for a brief second think that she's about to attack you, but she doesn't. And Anders sort of claps his hands and says, "Oh, dwarf from Norska, then you know precisely the kinds of dangers that I'm interested in finding, and why, unfortunately, in my age, I can't pursue them myself. I must rely on others, I'm afraid."
Those are the sorts of things I came to the Hager Crypts to find out about.
He claps his hand together and says, "Good, well, that sounds like it's settled then. I don't have any special jobs for you at the moment, but I have done a lot of research about this area, and I do know much about it. So if you have any ideas or leads or questions, I will do what I can to assist you. But all I ask in return is that if you find something ancient or forgotten, that you let me know about it so that I can hopefully get an excavation team up there as quickly as possible. I try to dabble in many things, whether it's archaeology or taxidermy or collecting or what have you."
Verbal nod, and say, do you have any indications on where we might start such a search for any valuables?
He roll either a charm or a gossip check.
Well, they're both the same for me.
Well, maybe one of your friends can assist easier.
There. Charm.
Okay, let's see, 1 success level.
I cannot assist as I have neither of those skills, because
He-
I am a dwarf.
He thinks for a few minutes. Okay.
Chris briefly considers helping you and then realizes that you're asking him where to find basilisks and things and does not assist.
He thinks for a minute and then holds up a finger and he says, "Have you heard of the entity they call Rogenbach?"
I will actually kind of perk up at this and say yes.
Are we standing outside the grounds of the camp?
Yes, we are.
No, Drac says that out loud.
Oh.
He chuckles and says, "Oh, I take it you brought it up around Otto then. Otto doesn't like to talk about what he calls superstitious rumors. Bad for business."
I've run into too many things that have been called superstitious rumors that have tried to kill me and my kin.
Well, he nods and says, "Yes, well, I must confess that the legends of Rogenbach are, let's say, few and far between. I've done a lot of research since before and after coming here," and he gestures to a large pile of books and records behind him, and says, "But Rogenbach seems to be, it seems like it was some sort of local deity that was worshipped by the people here alongside Tal and Raya before the cult of Sigmar, of course, made its aggressive push and takeover of all the lands in what we now know as Reichland. You see, the people of the Hager Cribs believed that Tal and Raya represented everything they needed to understand when it came to nature and beasts and the such. But Rogenbach, he was called Rogenbach the Forgotten One. And the peculiar thing I find about that particular mythos is that he was known as the Forgotten before any of this other stuff happened. Before Sigmar, even. Now, exactly who forgot him, or why he was forgotten, I'm not sure. But that likely plays into why there's so little information about him. All that I can find is that, according to local myths, which, I don't know, perhaps you can find more in the village, but from what I have found, supposedly, he is a deity that wanders these lands and has some great shrine hidden beneath the Hager Cribs themselves. And he seeks out all of those who should worship him, but do not pay him the homage he deserves, and takes them down below to harvest them and make use of their body and souls in reparation for all of the years he has spent in darkness and ignominy. But I think only in recent times have people begun to really... Well, let's just say I found evidence that his cult may be returning to this land.